Hello, welcome to the Elevate Your Wellbeing podcast with myself, Rachael. We're on episode 19. Okay, so before I dive in, I'm going to start off this episode the same way I start off practices in my Rise and Shine Wellbeing membership. Make sure you have curtains open, you have got some natural light getting on you. It's that time of year, especially for us in the Northern Hemisphere, as I'm in the UK. You might be enjoying this outside and making the most of going for a walk. You might be listening to this on a run. So just make sure you get some natural light. You also have some water. And if you're doing this where you're somewhere that you can sit down, have a journal and a pen because you might want to take some notes, but we will also have a journal prompt at the end of the episode. So you can kind of connect in with the topic that we're going to dive into for today. So it is the 7th of April if you're listening to this as the episode airs, and we're just the day after the full moon in Libra. So the full moon is always the opposite sign to the sign of whatever the sun. I can't talk right now. It's always good when you're doing a podcast, isn't it? The sun is always in the opposite sign to the full moon, or I should say the full moon is always in the opposite sign of what the sun is, because obviously the sun season is for a whole month. So right now we are in the middle of Aries season. Aries is the first sign of the zodiac. So when we have a full moon during Aries season, it's going to be in Libra, which is the opposite sign. So we're being taught about finding balance. Aries is the first sign of the zodiac, so it's all about you. Is that me or I or the I am? It's all about the ego, which is perfectly fine because we want to try and find that balance. But then Libra comes in and they're the halfway point in the zodiac. They're the 7th sign. So this is about your relationship with other people. So them, us, etc. So how can we find that balance between our own relationship and relationship with others? And this can also be our relationship with who we are as we put ourselves out into the world versus who we actually feel we are on the inside. And that's why I wanted to talk about this. Now, this is a topic I've wanted to talk about for a while because it's quite interesting hearing people mention this. And I'm like, I don't feel that person maybe knows what that means particularly, or as they're talking about it to a group, they're not explaining it more. So they're not making it clear on why they're highlighting this particular topic. So I want to dive into that. So have some water if you haven't already. Make sure you're hydrated. And you might already be thinking of this because you may have seen the topic if you've gone into the Spotify playlist to listen to this podcast or on Apple Podcasts. So you're like, okay, so the topic is what is toxic positivity? Now, social media can make this really easy. We're always positive, always putting on this shiny personality or this fabulous persona of what life is. We're not sharing all the facts or all of what's going on or what it actually took to get there. And we're very aware of highlighting what's actually wrong, but it's honoring the balance between the two. And that's why I really wanted, this is what really felt apt for this week's episode, where we're finding that balance between the sun and the moon, Aries and Libra. So having a positive outlook on life is amazing. It really, really does make a big difference. If you are someone who will always complain, if you're gossiping, if you're always listening or watching the news, and you aren't then taking on all the facts, you're sort of putting on your own opinion, then this can be a very negative vibration. If you're someone that spirals downward very easily, so you get caught up in your mind, so you might hear something from someone else, that's your relationship with someone else, and without maybe questioning it or looking into it further, you yourself might suddenly go into these thoughts that bring you down. It might bring in worries or concerns or doubts or fears. And this is very normal. I want to put that out there right away. This is really normal because it's how we're kind of programmed to think with so much of the stuff we have around us. Like I said, with social media, it's really highlighted even more so how we can have this toxic portrayal of what everyone's life looks like. It's that when we look at the cover of a magazine and we're like, I should look like that person, when really we just want you to be you. I want you to be you. I want me to be me, and go about and feel good. So there's an element of, yes, it's good to put on a brave face and smile, but it's also important to feel into your feelings. And this is where toxic positivity can come in, because it can be a case of ignoring those negative feelings or shunning them completely, or portraying as though you never have those feelings. It's wrong to have those feelings. And then people are shamed or guilted into, oh, well, I feel negative, or I have doubts or fears, and I shouldn't have that. And that's where the toxicity comes in, to always being positive. And there can be an element of brushing it off a little bit. If you know your trait at the moment is to go into a bit of a downward spiral, then this is something we did in our household when we moved into this house, because it was just like, it almost felt like there was one thing after another after another. It was like, what else? It's that, it's okay, if it comes in threes, if that typical like silly superstition of what's going to be the third thing, but this just felt like one thing after another. So we put up around the house, it'll be fine. And then it was just a funny little catchphrase that we ended up saying to ourselves was, it'll be fine. And that's what kept us going and got us to where we are now. So it worked. But we weren't ignoring what was happening that was causing us to say, but it will be fine. But we were just using that as a reminder of, we still come out through this on top. We still come out winning. It'll still be good. And I just wanted to highlight this, and that I actually have this really beautiful daily calendar that I put on my desktop. So it's like a page a day sort of thing with affirmations. And it is really beautiful. And there was some that were highlighting positivity. And I wanted to read these out. I've got 3 that I've highlighted. And I want to read the first one out now. And it really highlights what I'm wanting to get across with this particular episode, of why it's important to find that balance between being positive, but also feeling into your feelings. So first one, and then I'll dive into this a little bit more and then read the next one. So positive thinking and avoiding your emotions are 2 very different things. Once you learn to face and accept your emotions, you can rewrite your limiting beliefs. And then positive responses will develop more naturally. I'll just read that again. Positive thinking and avoiding your emotions are 2 very different things. Once you learn to face and accept your emotions, you can rewrite your limiting beliefs. And then positive responses will develop more naturally. This is what I was touching on. If you naturally go into a bit of a downward spiral, and I really, really recommend looking at the emotional guidance scale. And that is really, really interesting to see where you tend to naturally land. And it's just doing one step better. And, you don't have to go, if you're naturally at the, emotion 22, right at the bottom of the scale, and you can't expect to be right at the top with number 1, but it's going that step further. It's just taking one step at a time, just to improve how you're feeling. And like I said, when this says, once you learn to face and accept your emotions, you can rewrite your limiting beliefs. Now, these limiting beliefs are what cause you to have those downward spirals. And these are just beliefs that you've constantly thought over and over and over again. So it's just a thought that you keep on thinking that becomes a belief. So you've either been told this from someone close to you, or it's been a belief of a close friend or a family member, like a parent or a grandparent, and they've brought this belief onto you, and you've just taken that on board because that's been your truth. That's been their truth. But you don't have to continue it. So with the toxic positivity, it's then ignoring that and suppressing that. You want to allow yourself to feel it. Why am I feeling it? And then you can ask yourself, is this true? Is this true? And I know I normally do the journaling prompts through the end, or if they are going to be drip fed throughout, I do highlight it. So, but if you notice a limiting belief come up, if you're having these doubts or worries or fears, then you can ask yourself, is this true? Is this true? And then you can start rewriting it. And we'll go into that a little bit more with the prompt at the end of the episode today. But this, I think, is a really powerful tool to go into. So it's making sure you're honoring how you're feeling. Making sure you're honoring how you're feeling. So the second one I wanted to read out is this one. Positivity is essential for happiness. But remember that all emotions have something to tell us about ourselves. Process them, accept them, be willing to learn from them. Negative emotions may not be desirable, but they're vital for growth. How powerful is that? Let me read that one again. Positivity is essential for happiness, but remember that all emotions have something to tell us about ourselves. Process them, accept them, be willing to learn from them. Negative emotions may not be desirable. Like, I don't want to feel that way. It's probably what's coming up when you feel particular emotions, but they're vital for growth because it's honoring how you feel. And this can really easily come up. And I had this yesterday, and I'll probably go into this a little bit more on a different podcast episode, so I can go into it a little bit more fully, but I'm changing how I run one of my parts of my business. And some of the responses weren't the ones I was hoping for, but it allowed me to feel into them and go, okay, why do I feel like this? And honoring where that's coming from like early childhood. So I can process them, and that's allowing me to grow. So I can go, okay, that's why I respond like this. And this is what I then need to create for myself moving forward. So I can protect and nurture that part of myself. And then the last one is resisting an emotion is like living with a thorn inside you and pretending it's not there. You'll continue to feel its pain regardless of how much you try to ignore it. Relief will only come from accepting the emotion, no matter how painful it may be. Resisting an emotion is like living with a thorn inside you and pretending it's not there. You'll continue to feel its pain regardless of how much you try to ignore it. Relief will only come from accepting the emotion, no matter how painful it may be. And this can come up a lot when you work on your well-being or when you're working with a business, because when you go into business, when you're creating a business, you really do have to work on personal growth, personal development, and your mindset. And that's huge. And I think really it's so important with regards to whatever you're going into. So whether you're listening to this or you're working with me one-on-one for business mentorship and advice, or for well-being advice, working on yourself, developing your mindset, having that growth mindset, that ability to go, okay, this is who I was, this is how I was reacting, this is the impact, the effect it had on me. And I can sit with that and learn from that and grow through that and come out the other side is really, really powerful. And it's honoring that's all part of the journey. It's all part of the journey. And this is why staying in your comfort zone will end up creating you into this little fixed bubble, and it will make it even harder to get out of. So it's just honoring those emotions, knowing that it is an opportunity to grow, which is really, really beautiful. So I think this episode is going to be a little bit shorter and sweeter, but I think that's quite a nice one to do. So your homework could be to have a look at the emotional guidance scale. So you could quite literally like Google that and it'll come up, and it'll give you a list of 22 of the emotions. So the top one would be like joy, love, excitement. And I don't what I do. Let me have a look. I had the thought of about 1,000,000 books falling down as I find the right book. The emotional guidance scale. The top one, joy, appreciation, empowered, freedom, love. They all come in under the top one for the emotional guidance scale. The end one, the bottom of the pile, number 22, fear, grief, desperation, despair, powerlessness. So this is really interesting. If you're not sure how you feel, if you don't tend to check in with your feelings, that you can't describe it, then using the emotional guidance scale is really, really, really interesting. So an easy one to go to, I feel for me anyway, is doubt or worry. Doubt's 13, worry is 14. So the next one up from doubt is despair. Up from that, overwhelm. Up from that is frustration. And you think, well, how are they any better? But it's actually when you sit with them, you can see where you would sit on that scale, depending on how you're feeling. And as you then grow and build up from there, you might get to boredom and then suddenly contentment, hopefulness, optimism, positive expectation, happiness, passion, and then joy. So my favorite book on this topic, there's a few people that talk about it, but Gabby Bernstein in her book Super Attractor goes into this. And she goes into a really beautiful story on how she witnessed, I think it was a friend's son, go through this. And she didn't need to help him. She was just honoring, like, okay, this is what you're feeling. And she could see how he quickly went through that scale from near the bottom and got all the way up to the top in just a few hours. And I would really recommend going into that if you feel that you want to have a little bit of help with how you're wanting to feel and you're not sure how to identify that. And obviously, that's something we can do together as a coach as well if you're wanting to go more into one-on-one coaching. So before I wrap up today's episode with our journaling prompt, I just want to highlight that during April, there are slots open for 90 minutes. That's an hour and a half one-on-one coaching. And then once you go through one of those, I open up my private coaching diary. So you actually have more dates and times available to work with me one-on-one. And that's a 3-month or 6-month container. And we can go into well-being, we can go into business. It can be very, very specific to what you need help with. And if you've been here a while, you might have noticed there is a paid option for one episode that's currently up. So I'm slowly building up a library for a paid subscription. So as this has gone up, this is my first week of my new membership going live, which is the Elevate Your Wellbeing membership, where we do yoga and meditation. And this is basically the classes I've been teaching online for the last 3 years, where I moved from a yoga studio in person to online. I knew I needed to slightly tweak and change how I was running that. So rather than running it as a class pass or a drop it in, it's now a membership. So all the classes are recorded. So you can attend live or you can enjoy any of the recordings. Plus, you get at least 1 month. My aim is to do at least 1 per month, but I'm hoping to get to 2 per month with offering a yoga nidra meditation, which is a deep sleep meditation practice. But what I have done is, if you're not ready to join the membership yet, I know so many people really enjoy the yoga nidra meditations. So I have put them together within a paid subscription for the Elevate Your Wellbeing podcast. Now, I will be doing more episodes, so that will become part of what's available in the paid subscriptions. So that is, I think it's $7.99 a month, and that would be confirmed when you click on the link, which will be in the show notes. But there will be at least 1 Yoga Nidra episode per month. So there's one already in there, and there's one ready to be uploaded at the end of the month, which I'm really excited to share with you. So you have that option if you wish to practice that instead. So let's go into our journaling prompt for this week. So closing the eyes, focusing on the breath, listening to your body, and really feel into how you're feeling, and see if you can name the top 3 emotions you're feeling right in this moment. Name the top 3 emotions you're feeling in this moment. And then I have a little add-on from there. So if you're ready, you might continue. But if you need to, do pause and then come back into this to complete this journaling practice. But then ask yourself, what are the emotions you want to feel today? What are the emotions you want to feel today? So another way that you can look at this is, how am I feeling right now? And then, is this what I want to feel? How am I feeling right now? Is this what I want to feel? So what are the emotions you want to feel today? And then you can check in with, how can you create those emotions for yourself? So how could you do that for yourself today? So thank you for joining me for this week's podcast episode. I am looking forward to joining you next week. It will be episode 20. Can't quite believe we're at 20 episodes already coming up next week. If you enjoyed this, do share it on social media and tag me. All the information is in the show notes below. And I look forward to joining you next week.